Welcome back to the Untold Stories, exclusive before Start the Story Now. Subscribe to the channel and comment down where you're from and what time it is for you right now. Now, turn off the lights, settle in, and let the darkness speak. The year was 1905. Though the calendar never felt real in Carbon Hollow, the town existed like a bruised, dark, hidden, painful to press against. A cluster of slate-roofed houses and rust-colored chimneys lay pinned beneath the shadow of Harper's Ridge. A single unpaved road led into it, swallowed every spring by mud and wheel-eaten ruts. It was a place carved out of necessity, not intention. The company owned everything. The mine, the schoolhouse, the store where men signed for salt pork and flour they couldn't afford. Even the church bell was said to have been bought secondhand from a steamboat auction downriver, a bell that, as the stories whispered, had once tolled only for the drowned. But none of that mattered in the early frost of September 1905. Not until the morning they found Thomas Cafferty. The town breathes coal in Carbon Hollow. Coal was in everything. It stained the snow black in the winter. It caked under fingernails so deep it looked like decay. Women scrubbed it out of bedsheets and into their knuckles until skin cracked. Babies coughed up soot before they could speak, yet the mine provided. For nearly 40 years, Hallowich and Sons Mining Company sent men underground. Men went down. Coal came up. And sometimes death followed behind. They tracked it in every ledger. 1879. Cave in. 5 dead. 1888. Explosion. 13 dead. 1896. Gas leak. 32 dead. 1903. Missing boy. No trace. 1905. Well, you already know what they found that year, but you don't know how it began. Boy and the whistle. Thomas Cafferty was not meant to be strange. He was thin, sharp-eyed, and quiet, but in Carbon Hollow, that described half the boys his age. He worked odd jobs at the mine entrance, never deep enough to be considered a true breaker boy, but close enough to smell the gas when it seeped upward. He fetched tools, ran messages, knew the cinder paths like they had been carved into his bones. He was 11 years old when he vanished. 11 years old. And carrying a carved wooden whistle shaped like a bird's beak, a toy he'd taken to holding in his teeth like a pipe when he walked. That boy whistles to the stones. An old miner had said once. God help him if they ever whistle back. Thomas was last seen near the south wing shaft, long since boarded up after a rockfall killed 3 men. No one was allowed in, which meant, of course, children crept inside for stories and dares. It was said Thomas went in at dusk with 2 other boys, daring themselves to reach the old dynamite room. Only one boy came back. I heard him whistle. Then, the sound went lower. Diary page, unknown boy. Found 1906. The next morning, Thomas's mother found his boots at the entrance, one standing perfectly upright, as if he had stepped out of it mid-stride, the other leaning gently on its side, facing inward, toward the dark. Margaret Cafferty screamed, but the mine stayed closed, and the company man said, "He's run off." Coal humors do strange things. Best leave it. Yet no one forgot the whistle, not even when the first whistle was answered. Faint and trembling, from deep beneath the earth days later, long after Thomas should have been dead, a storm as coming rain arrived on the night of September 14th. Heavy, hard rain that made the window panes tremble and sent cold rivulets down chimney bricks. Lightning struck the ridge at midnight. The ground shook. Lamps fell. Dogs howled. Even the church bell, silent for 2 years, let out one long metallic groan, as if something had pulled the rope from below. Inside the mine, support timbers cracked like rifle fire. It was enough to scare old miners into praying aloud. Enough to make the foreman, a man with 2 missing fingers and a steel heart, order all shafts sealed until sunrise. But even as the rain roared overhead, a small light flickered behind the abandoned south wing beam. Lantern. Who lit that lantern would become one of the most debated. Fearful questions in Carbon Hollow. Some said it was boys. Some said it was thieves. But one old miner, drunk on laudanum and superstition, whispered, "No boy lit that light." The mine did, and the boy followed it. On the 9th day, for 9 days after the storm, no one entered the mine. Not the brakermen, not the foreman, not even the grave sinners who used to drink rotgut in the dark, where the foreman couldn't see. 9 days, because when men tried to lower lamps into the shaft, the flame guttered out. When they listened close near the beams, they heard breathing. Low, rhythmic breathing, like someone asleep inside the wall. On the morning of the 9th day, the company man arrived with orders to reopen the main tunnel. He spoke in clipped words and carried a revolver, though no one asked why. 2 men were sent in, first lanterns held before them. The 3rd man returned alone. "They found something," he said, "and you'll wish they hadn't." Thomas Cafferty found sitting upright. He was on level 4, deeper than any boy had reason to go. They found him in a stone alcove, knees drawn up, back resting against a wall of black slate. No signs of violence. Hands folded like he was in prayer, eyes open, mouth curved in the faintest smile. Not filthy, not starved, not decomposed. Just waiting. Someone had placed a lantern beside him, its flame still burning steadily. Thomas had been missing 9 days. No lantern could burn that long. The foreman's ledger men had to drag the foreman down to see for himself. He refused at first. "Boys die in tunnels," he muttered. "Stone takes them. That is the way. There is no mystery." But when he saw Thomas, he turned pale. He called for the doctor. He closed the shaft again. And he locked the door. That night, an argument broke out behind the company store. Old man Cooper claimed the foreman hadn't gone down to see the boy. He had gone down to see what was behind him. A wall of slate had been chipped away. Behind it, old timbers. Behind those, something older still. The ledger from that year shows a red mark next to Thomas's name, not an X, which meant dead, not a circle, which meant body returned. A single letter. D. No one knows what D meant, but every boy who vanished from Carbon Hollow had the same marking. Witness statements. 1905, I saw him sitting like a statue. Eyes like glass. I swear he breathed once. Samuel MacMiner, he was praying. Not to God, don't bury him. Margaret Cafferty. Mother, the walls were warm where we found him. Doctor's note, unsigned. The mine opens again. The company said it was an unfortunate tragedy. The boy likely fell and became trapped. They released thin paper notices. Wages resumed. Coal dust once again coated every window pane, but no man, woman, or child in Carbon Hollow forgot the way. Thomas had been found, and they did not forget the whistle, for in the days that followed, every night at the same hour, someone heard 2 notes echoing from inside the mine, a bird-like whistle. Then an answer. Lower, slower. Inhuman. It was late September, and the fireflies had already disappeared. Moss had started creeping back over the mine entrance, as if the hill itself was trying to reclaim what had been stolen from it. The lantern that had burned beside Thomas was gone now. Taken by the company and sealed in a warehouse. No one could enter without clearance, but the whispers had already spread. Some said coal dust coated Thomas's skin like baptism ash. Others said the mine itself was keeping him, as the old-timers phrased it, an offering returned half undone. But the most dangerous whispers came from the ones who looked closely at the records. Because in back rooms, behind fake walls and bolted drawers, were books no miner was meant to see. And those books had stories not just of Thomas Cafferty, but of every boy who disappeared from Carbon Hollow. The ledger that should not exist. The foreman kept 1 book for the company: wages, hours, deaths, and accidents. The church kept another baptisms, marriages, funerals. But it was the third book, locked in a metal chest under the superintendent's desk, that would spark fear for generations that no one knew its exact purpose. It was not written in company handwriting. Its margins were filled with numbers, dates, and symbols that resembled neither math nor prayer. It was called simply the Hollow Ledger. And beside each name was a mark, a straight line, alive. An X, dead, a circle, buried in consecrated ground, a blank, unknown, but then a fourth marking, a letter. D. And that letter appeared only beside the names of children specifically. Boys who had wandered too near the mine, disappeared, or been lost. Not once, not twice, but exactly every 9 years, starting in 1878. Patterns of disappearance. The names were never spoken aloud, but they were there, written in the ledger's warped pages. 1878 Samuel Hutchins, age 9, vanished after chasing a cat near the cinder heaps. 1887 Matthew Green, age 12, last seen playing marbles by the entrance shaft. 1896 Isaac Warren, age 10, disappeared during an Easter procession. Never found. 1905 Thomas Cafferty, age 11, found sitting upright in the mine, eyes open, lantern burning. 4 boys. 4 missing, 4 marked with the same red LETTERDA. Company clerk claimed it. I see the books, Ellis said, drunk. Every quarter, they balance, except. He leaned close and whispered, someone higher up tracks more than wages. Behind the digits, behind the pits. There are numbers that shouldn't be. Numbers we don't write. But they appear anyway. Like what? Elijah asked. Ellis swallowed. Like the numbers of those who go missing. And the mine doesn't fight it. Ellis murmured. As if the mountain had been paid in blood. The diary page, after Thomas was found. His mother, Margaret, threw herself into searching his room. She refused to accept his death. She believed him under some kind of spell. She believed with absolute conviction. He wasn't alone in that dark. She found a small notebook, pages brittle with coal dust, beneath his pillow. One page was more recent, the pencil mark still clean. It read, they asked me why I come back. I said I don't. They bring me. One voice, then many. I thought it was Pa, but Pa doesn't smile this way. They said I'd sit, and I'd stay. I'll learn. I promise. On the bottom corner, a doodle of a lantern, with 2 flames. Margaret visits the mine 2 nights after the boy's body was recovered. Margaret Cafferty walked alone to the mine entrance. She carried a small wooden cross, a piece of bread, and the carved whistle. Witnesses watched her kneel down in place, each item gently at the threshold. She whispered something only the wind seemed to hear. Then she stood slowly and walked away. No one knows if she cried, but the next morning, the bread was gone, the whistle was gone. Only the cross remained. Its base was blackened, as if from flame, a miner's testimony. It was nearly a month before anyone dared descend into the old shaft again, and even then, only the most desperate. One of them was Jonah Barker, a widower, owed back wages, and too hungry to care where the shaft led. He carried a lantern and a small tin of matches. He later claimed, under trembling breath, that he heard 2 whistles echoing in the dark, one high, one low. He marked the wall with chalk where he heard them, like any miner tracks gas pockets. But when he turned to leave, someone had wiped the chalk away, every mark gone, except one strange symbol, now left behind in its place, a red circle, with a D inside. Jonah quit the next day. The Reverend's confession. Reverend Alton Halley was known to keep sermon notes, written in the margins of old scrap paper, sometimes even on company receipts. He was not known, however, to confess. Yet in the winter of 1905, He came to the church at dusk and waved over a caretaker to unlock the side door. Once inside, he placed a bundle of letters on the altar, then sat, face buried in his hands, and said, "I was told to forgive what cannot be forgiven. But I cannot." He asked the caretaker to burn the letters. No one must read them. But the caretaker, curious and bold, read one dot. It was dated 1896. "The boy is gone. Isaac Warren, sweet-faced, loved by the schoolmistress. They say he wandered and died, yet I heard singing in the shaft. Gloria in excelsis, in a voice too small, followed by another voice not born of God. They say the debt was paid. Paid to whom?" The caretaker fled that night. The letters were burned, but the words lived on in whispers. Lantern that shouldn't burn. The most troubling thing for the town was the lantern, the one that had burned beside Thomas's body. A miner examined it during the recovery. A simple oil lamp, brass with a cracked glass pane. Stenciled on it was a number no one said out loud, 09. No man carried a lamp marked so. Company lamps were numbered by work shift, not any other code. Later, the foreman insisted the lantern had been relocated to the company storage room. Yet on 3 separate nights, different townsfolk claimed to see a faint, flame-like glow from behind the boarded south wing shaft. Each time rain washed away the footprints in the mud leading there, footprints that were not shaped like boots, child-sized, bare. There were sounds behind the stone, not echoes, not tools, not something else. The winter of 1905 arrived early in Carbon Hollow. The clouds lay low and heavy over the ridge. Snow drifted down through the creaking beams, coating everything in a thin layer of pale ash. It should have been quiet, as long winters are. Yet the cold brought voices that did not belong to the living, and now the mine was making sounds no one could explain. The snow-fallen night on November 19, 1905. A snowstorm crept in without warning. Bare trees bowed under frost, and frozen laundry snapped like bones in the wind. At midnight, a crew of night watch miners gathered by the fire barrel outside the main shaft. They spoke of lost wages, unhealed wounds, and a missing boy now buried in their thoughts. Then something shifted beneath their feet. Elijah Mack, the same. Others reported strange knocks along the walls, 6 knocks at a time. Repeated. Always 6. The priest was asked if it meant something. He only shook his head. The cracking stone coal collapses are never quiet. They roar, screech, spit forth clouds of gas and shards of ancient rock. So when coal-face men returning from the lower scene started reporting cracking sounds behind the sealed south wing wall, the foreman dismissed it. Timber settling, he said, but it wasn't timber. Coal does not crack like wet wood, one miner claimed. He heard something breathing behind the wall. Slow at first, then speeding up when he came close. He left a chalk mark on the stone, meaning unsafe. The next morning it was wiped clean, but a new mark was etched in its place. A circle, with the letter D. Strange. Dirtfalls collapsed. Slate occasionally produces what miners call dirtfall, a sudden trickle of dust or small pebbles, but this was different. It happened only at night. Only near the sealed wing. One miner left his lamp burning by the wall one evening before leaving. He returned hours later to find it glowing softly and half buried in fresh coal dust. As if something had sprinkled it like sand. This happened again and again. Enough that the men devised a test. They placed a circle of string around the lamp before shifting. When they came back, the string was unbroken, but the lamp was moved outside the circle, 3 inches to the right, and its flame was burning stronger than before. As if someone or something had touched it. Fed it. This was not gas. Gas pockets are a danger. Every miner knows. They suck air from the lungs. They whisper in faint blue flames that flicker along the walls. They take men without warning. But a gas pocket doesn't sing. It doesn't hum lullabies, and it certainly doesn't respond to whistles. Yet one night, as Elijah Mack walked past the shaft to fetch his shovel, he heard it again, a boy's whistle, 3 notes, brisk, familiar. Elijah froze. "Tom?" Silence, then a reply. Same whistle, but slower. He dropped his shovel and ran without thinking. But when he got home, he found his front door ajar. Inside, on the table, lay a pile of coal dust. In the shape of a circle. Inside it, a feather. Elijah left town the next day. His house burned down that winter. An underground chamber. Rumors swirl like smoke in small places. It wasn't long before someone claimed to have seen a gap forming in the sealed wall leading to what they called the chamber. The chamber was mentioned once, only once, in an old 1870s engineer's letter. Long before the mine expanded. Double quotes. Beyond the first collapse's space unfathomed, it said. Something like a hollow carved by neither man nor nature. Best not explore it. The letter was never reported again, but the engineer was found months later, body mangled, as if crushed by unseen weight. The story was buried. The 7 names the ledger revealed, 4 boys marked with D. But one night, in the company office, a new book was found by a clerk in the storage room. A narrow, thin book, old. It was labeled Agreement No. 04. Inside, 7 names. All children, each marked with a year beside it. Only 4 were marked as paid. 3 were yet unmarked, under the year 1905. 3 blank spaces remained. Thomas was only the first. Why were more names in the ledger? Who chose them? Town meetings turned dark. People in Carbon Hollow were not loud by nature. They had lost too much to coal dust and silence to raise their voices easily. But after the 3rd midnight whistle, and after coal dust was found trailing into 2 separate homes, people started to gather in the church. The priest barred the pulpit, forced the doors shut, stood and shouted, "Do not speak of the dead as if they summon you. Do not let the mine name your children." But the people pushed in. Margaret Cafferty was there. Nearly mute since her son's death, she only spoke once. Thomas heard it. He learned from it. He obeyed. He wasn't alone. The church bell rang that night, 3 times. No one had pulled the rope. And the bell had not rung in 2 years. Night voices. Workers who lived close to the mine entrance reported voices beneath the ground. Not gas hisses. Not collapsing shale. Voices. One man claimed, "I heard my brother. I heard him. He died in the cave-in of '88, but I swear to God, I heard him whispering my name." Others heard children. The smallest voices, counting. 9 numbers. Over and over. One woman swore she heard a prayer, but it was backwards, stone that breathes. Then came the final sign. When the first thaw came in February 1906, some men went inside to prepare the low chamber for reopening. They carried tools and candles. At the collapsed wall where Thomas was found, they paused. The wall silent, smooth before. Now had, but nothing about that funeral was right. The priest began with trembling hands, thumbing an ancient prayer book that looked much older than the stained church it was read in. There were only 19 people in attendance, mostly cold, dust-stained men, their hats in their hands, and 2 crying sisters who barely knew the boy. The church bell did not ring. The bell had not rung in 2 years since the day of the gas explosion on St. Agnes Day, when 32 men were entombed in collapsed stone. No replacement rope had ever been installed. It was said no one could find where the rope vanished to. Yet as the coffin was closed, one of the women swore she heard a toll, 3 hollow, faint, metallic chimes coming from underground. No embalming required. Thomas's body was strange. More than a week had passed between the time of his disappearance and his discovery. Yet there was no smell of rot. His skin was pallid, yes, but smooth and unblemished. His eyes, open when found, had been gently closed by the local doctor. His hands were still folded neatly over his lap. When Dr. Weatherly examined him prior to burial, he noted in his private notebook, "Corporeal state preserved against reason. No visible decay. Cold to touch. Flesh pliable. No insect activity. Impossible." He suggested embalming, but Margaret refused. "He didn't age in that mine," she said. "The dirt won't harm him now." Dr. Weatherly recorded one other, more chilling observation, which he never shared publicly. Chest cavity appears unusually still. No stiffness in joints of legs. Body pliant, almost as if prepared to sit upright again. The burial and the tremor. The burial was short. The coffin was pine plain, unadorned, lined with thin cloth and the whistle Thomas had cherished. His mother placed it beneath his folded hands. No songs were sung. No children followed the procession. Only the weight of silence trailed behind the coffin as they carried it uphill in the biting wind, toward the churchyard where generations of miners lay buried, some with names, most without. But as they lowered the coffin into the ground, the earth shook, a short, sharp tremor. Men stumbled. The coffin tilted in midair. "It's just a coal shift," the foreman said. But others looked at Thomas's mother. She did not flinch. Did not blink. She whispered, "He hears. He knows." The dirt was shoveled, the cross placed. But no one lingered. Even the gravedigger didn't finish covering the mound until the next morning. The empty grave on October 10th, 3 days after the burial. A child wandered up the hill to visit his own father's grave. He noticed something strange. The earth over Thomas's grave had sunk, not from settling or rain, but as if someone had pressed down on it. He ran back into town, breathless, calling for his mother. Within 2 hours, a gathering formed at the churchyard. The priest reluctantly fetched his iron shovel. The dirt was dug up. The coffin unearthed. It was cracked open. Inside, nothing. No body. No whistle. Nothing but a thin lining of coal dust. The search that terrified the town at first. No one wanted to speak. The children were sent indoors. The men stood around the grave, shifting their weight, looking up at the mine entrance beyond like it would stare back at them. The priest suggested grave robbers. But what grave robber leaves a coffin in perfect condition and takes just the body? Others had darker theories. Someone said the mine had called him back. Others claimed they saw footprints in the frost, leading back toward the shaft. Someone else swore they saw a faint glow from that direction the night before. A small lantern, burning in the dark. A woman fainted when she heard that. Margaret Cafferty's silence. Margaret did not join the search. She did not weep or wail. She sat by her kitchen window throughout the night, hands folded on the table like waiting for company. When asked about the missing body, she said calmly, "Thomas learned how to sit. He learned how to wait. He was never alone." When pressed further, she produced a page from his notebook. "When not seen before." It read, "They sit above and below. They come and go. I sit with them soon." Underneath was a symbol, a circle with a D inside. The forgotten door. 2 boys, eager to prove their bravery, went to explore behind the abandoned church. They found a maintenance hatch, one used to access the old coal chute tunnels that were built under the church in the 1870s. Hatch was unlocked. Inside, the boys found a trail of small coal dust footprints leading down, a piece of wax cloth torn matching the lining from Thomas's coffin. And resting on a damp stone step, a single carved wooden whistle. None of the boys touched it. They ran screaming, the tune of the dead that night. The town woke to a sound no one had heard in centuries, whistling, a faint, childlike melody rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. It drifted from the graveyard. It echoed through the alleys. It whined beneath floorboards. One woman barricaded her door. The company sent men within the week. 5 men arrived in suits, not miners but administrators. The kind of men who wrote letters with ink and left stains of blood on their signatures without ever holding a shovel. They ordered the mine sealed. Every shaft, every window, every access tunnel. With boards, chains, and tar. But men in town claimed to see movement behind the broken glass at night. A faint glow, the light of a lantern, slowly. Faint whistles began drifting across the abandoned tracks at dusk. The children heard it first, then the women as they scrubbed coal-black clothes under freezing water pumps. The fathers heard it last, sitting on their porches in silence, not daring to admit what they recognized. It was the tune Thomas used to whistle. Except deeper, echoing, a duet. The hidden chamber breaches just miles away. A retired miner named Callum Birch took it upon himself to survey the area. He had worked the Harper's Ridge shafts for 40 years. He knew every foot of subterranean corridor, living and dead. He measured fresh cracks in the hillside. He walked the perimeters by lantern light. And then, one freezing night, he found a depression by the mine's side wall, a dip in the earth, shaped like an ellipse. Over what would have been the sealed south wing chamber, the fallen earth was still warm, and beneath it, faint as frost evaporating, were footprints, bare, child-sized, trailing down toward the cave-in. Callum followed them. His lantern never came. Back up. Margaret's journal. It was only after Margaret Cafferty died in 1928 that her journal was found, tucked behind loose stones in her chimney. Written in old ink, with drawings of lanterns and eyes. It revealed what many feared. Margaret had returned to the mine every night for weeks after Thomas's burial. She heard him. "He sang to me last night below the stones," one entry reads. "He's not afraid. He is surrounded." Another entry. "They are coming for a 7th. There will only be quiet once the circle is complete." Her final entry, written in trembling black. "I cannot close my eyes. Every time I do, I see him, sitting still, listening to that deep voice in the dark. I must close the ledger, but I cannot close the mine." Her journal ended there. Margaret had folded a blank sheet between the last pages. On it, drawn in graphite, was a single shape, a circle. A letter inside it. D. Hush, Clause No. 9 in 1912. A former clerk for Hallowich and Sons Mining Company issued a signed confession before his death. He had been responsible for processing payroll and the secret emergency fund used to relocate miners after tragedies. His confession was short, 1 page, scrawled, "We signed. We swore. We paid. We knew it was not just men who died. The ledger was not for wages but for offerings. Every 9 years. Till 7 were taken. That was the bargain. That was the debt." The confession was never made public. It was found years later in an auction box of company papers. The paper was marked at the bottom. Clause No. 9 debt settled by DUSD underneath that phrase. An unknown hand had traced a single red streak across the page, perfectly straight. The mine reopened one last time. Years passed. The mine collapsed in sections. The town dwindled, though some families remained stubborn or cursed. Then, in the spring of 1934, a group of corporate surveyors arrived under the guise of resource reassessment. One of them, Garrett Loomis, climbed the hill with a crew and broke through a rotting timber door leading into the old tunnel. His men reported hearing voices behind the walls, voices of children. All speaking in unison. "Sit, listen, wait." One man fled without his tools. Loomis descended alone. He was never seen again. The ledger's final entry. The ledger, the hollow ledger, has changed hands many times in the decades since the mine's closure. It surfaces every few years, then disappears. A record of those who vanished, of names and symbols. Of 7 boys, 7 cycles, 7 deaths. The last page of the ledger, if it is to be believed, has only one entry remaining. Name number 7 owed in waiting. Some believe it was Thomas. Some believe he was only the 5th. Some claim the last child returned. Others say the last one never left, or that the boy now chooses still sitting somewhere in the dark, whistling his tune as he counts. Once more, to 9. The last sound in the hollow in 1964. Construction crews drilled new foundation holes in the ridge above Old Carbon Hollow. One night, a young worker heard faint humming from a small dry sinkhole nearby. He leaned down, pressed his ear to the stone dot, then he screamed dot something, whispered back through the rock dot something that was whistling. He quit the next morning and left Pennsylvania. He died in Tennessee in 1989. His obituary read, "Survived by no family, but often found humming lullabies into the night." Local legend. Modern hum